Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular scheduled Tabortown Council meeting for January 8th, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order and ask for an adoption agenda as presented, please. Councilor Firth,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. And just for the record, Councilor Sorensen is unable to attend today's meeting. Item 3, public hearings. There are none. Item 4, adoption of minutes. Item 4.1, minutes of regular meeting of council, December 18th, 2023. Mr. Tebow.
Minutes are in front of council for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Any questions or concerns? Councilor Bruin,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion we adopt the minutes as presented.
motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Business arising there are none. Bylaws, item 6.1, proposed amended bylaw, item 1-2024. Mr. Tebow.
So there's a little bit of an explanation that comes with this one. As was mentioned to council previously, we were looking for applications for our SDAB board. It's not normal that we meet too often, that we don't get too many appeals for this board. I think since I've worked here, there's been 2. So that's 1 per year, basically. As it happens, we had 2 folks come forward for applications. We need at least 3 for quorum. And so we don't have that. And we just received an appeal. So appeals come with a bit of a legislated time frame to them. So administration quickly put this amendment together to the bylaw. It's an amendment that we kind of have discussed as a council before. So what this amendment allows for is for sort of a regional approach to get other people to participate on the SDAB board. Currently, it is Town of Taber residents only. So the one adjustment that we're looking to make is to open it up to 18-year-old or adults that may be outside of the Town of Taber to participate on the board. So we've asked for all 3 readings to happen this evening, which will then allow us to get going right away tomorrow morning, find us a person, and then council will also have to go through the appointment of person or persons to this board before we can go through the advertising requirements and meet our timeline. So that's what's in front of you tonight. If there's any further explanation needed, I'm not sure what else I could provide, but over to you.
All right, thank you. Councilor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Tebow. So if we do have residents of the town of Taber that do come forward after we've made this amendment, we have the ability to change it back. Is that correct?
The way this is worded, you can change a bylaw whenever you want to change a bylaw.
Right.
So there's been some debate with administration. There is 5 spots available. We have 2. We could ask to get appointed from outside of our region up to 3. So if council has a preference and they'd like to leave 1 spot open or 2 spots open, we only need 3 to create quorum. The challenge with 3 is if someone can't make it on a particular date, then we're back in a bad spot. So administration had thought about perhaps putting 2 names forward and leaving 1 space open in case someone does come forward, but totally up to council how you might want to handle that. I think administration would be more comfortable leaving a space open than filling all of them. They're typically a 2-year appointment is my understanding. So I don't know that we would, unless we wanted to do something different from an appointment perspective.
All right, thank you. Councilor Bruin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Councillor Firth kind of asked my questions. This isn't considered to be a temporary thing. Your suggestion perhaps appointing 2 from out of the area. Is there a fee to this? Is they be paying something, I would think, to do this service?
There's not an additional fee for this particular thing that I'm aware of. We already, so we're talking with ORSC, and ORSC oversees some kind of a regional group of folks already. And we already have an agreement with ORSC for other things, and so this would just fall in line with that.
I would have. I don't think I'd have any objection to it. I think it's sometimes not a bad idea to have someone from out of the community seeing these things as well for a different view. So I'd be in favor of doing the 2, but leaving 1 spot open.
All right, thank you. Councilor Beckering.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I looked at this bylaw and it's not unusual for smaller communities to struggle with being able to fill vacancies on the appeal boards or any other committee for that matter. And I think I agree with Councilor Bruin that sometimes it's not a bad idea to get some outside person to come in from either the MDF Tabor or Lethbridge or Coldell, who knows where, to fresh set of eyes doesn't hurt once in a while. And I would say that we should go ahead with this bylaws presented and be prepared to make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you.
Move the council gives first reading to amending bylaw 1-2024.
All right, thank you. Also have a question from Councilor Renford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only question is this for all boards then? Because it kind of reads like, or is it just for, you know, the appeal board? Like with this now that you could be on the police commission?
It's not. No, it's just for the SDAB board. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate the motion, Councilor Berger. Just one question from myself. In the event we can't get anybody, what then?
We're hoping that's not the event.
Hate to play devil's advocate.
we
you know.
would be offside from a legislative perspective. We can ask for extensions on things.
Okay.
We'd rather not go down that road. But
Okay.
I believe we've asked them for extension before.
Let's hope that's not an issue.
Yes, that's what we're hoping.
All right, thank you. We do have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Someone prepared to make the second required motion. Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council give second reading to amending bylaw 1-2024.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Someone prepared to make the third required motion. Councilor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the council unanimously agrees to proceed with third and final reading to bylaw 1-2024, being the amending bylaw of the town of Tabor as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And someone prepared to make the fourth required motion. Councilor Bruin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the fourth motion that council gives third and final reading to the amending bylaw 1-2024.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item 7.2, Tank 77 Plan and Initiative. Mr. Tebow.
Item 7.1, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did jump that. All right, there we go. Utility bill and refund, it is. Mr. Tebow.
So Mr. Egan is here if there's any questions around the utility billing refund. This is very similar to the other two that we had already done. We had one more resident come forward and point out that they had also participated in this. And so the same activity happened. We went through our utility billing deal and came up with the rounded off number of a $60 credit to their bill. I believe the other ones were 100 and 120 or something like that. So Mr. Egan is here for any questions, but if not, that's what it's about.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? All right, someone prepared to make a motion. Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council directs administration to provide a water utility credit of $60 towards the next available utility bill to the affected residents for water provided by the residences in support of the community garden users at Prairie Sunset Avenue when the town water supply was interrupted during the summer of 2023.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now on to item 7.2, Tank 77 Planning Initiative. Mr. Tebow.
This one we will get Mr. Egan to come forward and speak to for council.
All right, thank you. Mr. Egan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon.
So by way of a little bit of history, the town received a grant funding for the downtown revitalization project from Prairie Economic Development Canada some time ago. This grant was used for a number of items, and the administration received approval from the granting authority to construct a downtown park at the corner of 47th Avenue and 51st Street, and council approved this administration to proceed with this project. During the inception planning work, the town received an estimate of approximately $250,000 to bury existing overhead power lines. The project was then separated into two phases. The completion of the park being phase one, as required to meet the time funding requirements for reimbursement from the grant, and the Tank 77 feature was relegated as phase two. At present, the park is substantially complete, and administration is seeking approval to undergo some programming work to confirm the requirements of the Tank 77 structure. The needs, examine the potential alternative locations that fit with those program requirements, generate preliminary cost estimates needed to complete a project statement for future project and grant approvals. This RFD requests funding to support the external consultants required to complete this inception planning and programming work needed to advance this particular project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Egan. Any questions arising? Councillor Bruin.
Thank you. What is the cost of moving this power line? Like, I don't see any costs here. I'm sorry if I missed it.
So that was the $250,000 estimate from Fortis.
To move the power line?
To move the power lines in the area from the existing above ground infrastructure to underground infrastructure.
Well, that's an awful lot of money.
It is.
So I think you have to look for another site for that. But how far away do we have to be from the existing power lines? Is it even feasible to put the?
It depends on the final structure that's required to meet the programming requirements for the actual replica. So if the replica was a quarter size, then we probably wouldn't need to move the power lines, but a full-size replica would require the removal.
Yeah, it's a certain distance you have to be from the power line with any structure, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank
That's quite a
you. Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No question, just a comment. Well, actually, I do have a question. So the replica, will it be, there's no function to it, it's purely aesthetic, it's just a model of the original tank, is that correct?
So the programming that we're asking for would define those requirements, which would be fundamentally different if it was a working model that was a museum that required heating, and or if it's just a physical replica,
Right.
or something that's smaller, or it depends on, so what we would build and in what location would be determined by those program requirements that administration doesn't have at the moment. So we would ask that we would move into a programming format and either entertain with a subcommittee of council or a particular board, whatever council designates, so that we could sit and try and figure out what it is that we're trying to accomplish with the particular replica.
Follow up?
Sure, absolutely.
So the $6,000 is just to define the project, that is not for the building of the replica?
No, no, it's just for this initial programming phase that'll allow us to establish a cost estimate, likely a preliminary schedule, how long it would take to build the thing that comes out of the programming, and identify and characterize several locations, and perhaps get to a single location that is preferential. We would produce a project statement, and then we would come back to council, seek approval to move forward with it, or push it to a capital project year, and we also use all of that information to seek grant funding.
Councillor Bruin?
Thank you. My thoughts were it's just going to be a replica. It wasn't going to be functioning, because we don't want to blow all of our money on a tank that we don't really intend to use. It's just to look good. So the $6,000 would be, what does the $6,000 accomplish?
So if that was council's direction, then I would suggest we wouldn't need the $6,000. We actually have sourced original plans for the original construction, so we know what it is, how big it is. If it was purely just the replica with no functionality associated with, meaning, obviously, we weren't thinking we needed to put water in trains.
No.
But
water tower,
it could be used for interpretive. There's a story behind Tank 77 being the first structure in Tabor and establishing Tabor.
I would say a plaque under it saying that, simple. Don't just spend the money on the park and.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bruin. I just got a question about that too. Like, should we go the programming route? First of all, who does the programming, and how long might that take?
So an architect typically is used, and that's what we've contemplated in this RFD.
Okay,
And the programming phase is usually measured in weeks. maybe a few months, depending again how complicated the options are to be considered. They
Okay,
would
yeah.
configure each of those options, price them, provide some feedback, and so it's a back and forth work in order to establish consensus from a decision-making body about what it is we think we should do. And then we would look for options of the
All right.
location of it and
Okay.
assess those
So
as
it
well.
seems like that's become a little bit convoluted on where we need to go with it. You would think we can do that within our own confines without spending that $6,000 for one. But I appreciate your input with what that involves, and makes sense in some ways. But I guess also maybe more some discussion with Mr. Tebow and I have had, and some other individuals that have Fortis, well, actually employees of Fortis. I understood as long as we didn't go over the 50-foot mark, which is roughly, it was a little bigger than that actually, but as long as we didn't go over the 50-foot mark, we had to be so far back from the setback from the power lines, whatever that is, it would fit that model. Is that accurate, or is that known to yourself?
So we haven't received, because we don't have an idea of exactly the size of the replica,
Right.
they haven't been able to do their calculations as far as
Okay.
the voltage of the adjacent lines. And
Yeah,
it's
because
a-
I can tell roughly that the actual width of that was 21 feet officially, and 56 foot tall. So does it have to be 56 feet? No, not necessarily. So to me, if it's under the 50-foot mark, whatever that might be, whatever's deemed feasible, suitable, reasonable, all of the above, then we're good to go, in my mind. And whatever construction is involved, we're also under a timeline, are we not, Mr. Tebow, for the March 31st to complete that grant expenditure?
So we haven't got an official grant extension in writing back our direction.
Right.
We're still putting together all the invoicing for the finalized park that we have done and
Right.
sending that in. So administration's thoughts, specifically finance deals with the granting entities, thinks that they would be willing to, but we have already got one extension on this, or maybe even
I know, I understand
on
that,
that,
yeah.
So right now, December 31st was the completion date and
Mm-hmm.
requirement for the existing funding. There are funds left over from
Right.
that grant, and if we can, so yes, we would be under a time crunch.
So
and-
that's another question I have there. Should it be elected to go off-site, does that fit that particular mold? The initial concept to change that around for that location was all about that location, correct?
So the grant is the downtown revitalization grant, and so it would be within the general area of the downtown section of town.
Yeah, the beauty about that spot that was picked in parallel, coming up with the concept, et cetera, it's virtually a stone's throw away from the original location, so perfect, right? So, I guess that would be fairly disappointing if we weren't able to put it in that park as was the original model was designed, right? Councilor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, from my perspective, the cost of burying the line and moving the line is prohibitive in my view. And to look at a structure that's less than 50 feet or 50 feet or less, wow, that's a tall structure, guys. I don't think it would even fit properly. I think it would be overwhelming. At 50 feet, I'm a tall guy, but oh my goodness, that's tall. 50 feet is too high already in my view.
Yeah.
Especially for a non-functioning thing. It's just a replica. A replica usually is not the same size as the original anyway.
That's right, yeah.
So I don't think what the big deal is here. Just look at the picture and get somebody to build it.
That's what I'm saying. I agree. I'm saying if it's 20 feet, 30 feet, whatever, the light standard, I believe, is 30 feet. Is that not right?
I think the light standard is 30 or 32 feet, that double davit you're talking in
Yeah,
the
so
parking
just to
lot?
give you an idea, that light standard is 30 feet roughly. So that light standard is not terribly intrusive to me for that height. So if it was something similar or whatever council deems appropriate, right? Anyway, so again, it certainly doesn't have to be 50 feet. I would agree 100%. But that, 25, 30 feet, I think that covers the gamut. Or I think there's been some discussion about potentially doing something like a little bit of a walk-in, a little bit of circular walk-in to have things on the wall. I don't know if that's to be heated per se or whatever, but something similar so it's open seasonal type thing. And I think that would be more than suitable. And I don't see that that's that cost involved. I don't, unless I'm missing something, Mr. Egan, with what we're suggesting there. So, yeah, that would be the basic concept. Mr. Tebow?
So I guess I just reiterate from administration standpoint is we're just looking for that direction. If council decides tonight that you want to provide administration the ability to make something fit, I'm still hearing a bit of, is it just a replica? Can you have a door that goes inside? These are the things that administration needs to know before we go and build something. So if we can hash that out tonight, if council says this is what we want, then there will be no need to spend $6,000 and we can go find what the answer is to what council says they want.
All right, thank you, Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is this tank on stands or is it just a tank? I haven't
it's
seen
just-
a picture of it or,
Yeah, I could show you. It's just a kind of a
like it's on
standalone.
stands.
It's,
I'm just thinking like 50 feet is
what?
awfully high. And we start getting into heights like that, you gotta worry about wind. And,
Oh, yeah,
like
no.
I would agree 30, 35
30 is
feet.
probably lots, 30 is
And
lots, yeah.
Fortress would tell you how close you can be.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
That's what
like
I'm saying.
they,
I
you
think
don't have to
that's
study it.
30
every
foot
time.
would be very suitable in my
Yeah,
mind.
I think so.
Equal to that light standard. Can't go wrong with that, I don't believe. Councilor
And,
Firth.
but I wouldn't, if you're gonna have it so you can walk into it, I don't think that would be smart. Just you'd have a place for people to congregate.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Reminds
But
me of
it's-
the old P slide we used to have.
The only reason that was brought up, I think Mr. Tebow and I were kind of tossed around some ideas and it, it had some merit there to be able to have something on the walls. You don't have to worry about weather outside, pictures or whatever, memorabilia, et cetera. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be any walk-in at all. Well, it's not really on stands. You got to see a picture, Jackie. That's the best way I can hear, Councilor Broom. That's the best way to explain it. So, Councilor Firth.
Thank you. My concern is less about how it looks and more about how it's going to be funded. So if the construction of this replica is going to be grant funded, or the funding of this study as to what it's going to look like is going to be grant funded, I would be in favor of it. Excuse me. If it's going to come from capital reserves, I would not be in favor of it. I think that the park itself is definitely a benefit and it adds something to our downtown, but the cost benefit of a replica, I'm not sure would add that much to it, so.
No, Councilor Firth, thank you for that. But basically, that's kind of what we're talking about. There is grant monies available, correct? And kind of confirmation of the extension piece, I guess, is still.
Right. We would probably ask for some kind of a motion that spoke to acquiring that grant funding, if that was what council's direction needed to be.
Right.
So we don't know that we have or don't have an extension at this point.
100%. Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you, Councilor Beckering.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's pretty hard to make a motion to ask for grant funding if you don't know the value of the proposal, because we have no idea at the present time, right? And I can throw a number out there, but we don't really know. I do think that I have enough trust and appreciation of administration to come up at the next meeting and say, look, this is what the flavor of council, as we saw it, this is what we think. Rather than making motions, Mr. Mayor.
I would agree, 100%.
And
Yep.
come up with something, because you know the pictures, you've seen the pictures and all the requirements thereof, and just come to make a proposal to council and how much, and we go from there. Is that okay?
Mr. Tebow.
Yeah, that would be acceptable and fall under alternative one. I don't know, Chris, if you know exactly what was remaining, or that maybe not exactly, but thereabouts. Do we have a ballpark figure of what was remaining in that grant unspent?
My guess is there's several $100,000 remaining in the grant if it's extended.
Okay, so saying that, just to confirm that we are not in need of a motion, that as Councilor Becker going to get the flavor of council is pretty clear.
Alternative one would be the motion that I would recommend.
All right, Councilor Becky.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to make a motion that council requires additional information from administration regarding this project at the next meeting.
All right, perfect. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 7.3, information for council. Mr. Tebow.
This information item, I had sent this out to council in your emails. There's nothing additional added to this particular item. This is the three ministerial approvals we got for our regional grant applications. So a while back, if council recalls, we did a regional water regional water plant grant study, regional wastewater plant grant study. And I believe there was one thing through FCSS, they had some programming study. So the FCSS study was put forward by Sterling to be the managing partner. Town of Tabor was the managing partner for the wastewater study, and the water study is Coaldale as the managing partner. So we're involved in all of them, which is why we received a copy of all three letters. There has been an initiation email that came my way to have Kaylin from Coaldale, myself, and Grant Hunter meet on January the 11th to discuss next steps on these particular grants. MPE was the initiator of these grants, and so I'm sure that will form part of the discussion along with Mr. Egan. So that's what the information items are about. So we were successful in all of them. There is no matching portion for the town, and $200,000 was approved for all three individually, so $200,000 each.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? All right, none whatsoever. Moving on. Item 7.4, response to standing item 363, 2023. Mr. Tebow.
We'll get Mr. Egan to come up and speak to this. I'm happy to get going on some of these standing items and get them off my list.
All right, thank you, Mr. Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This item was came from the November 14th council meeting, where Councillor McLean asked administration to look at the cost of extending the sidewalk on 60th Avenue. There is a project statement attached to the RFD. There are three things that require consideration. Two of them are physical. There's a light standard that needs to be moved, relocated, and a utility box that needs to be moved because it would be in the way of the sidewalk. And the third item which we would check on is that the reason that there is no sidewalk there to start with, that particular location sits on top of the utility right-of-way. And typically, the right-of-way owners do not permit construction on top of. They permit landscaping, soft landscaping, things like that are fairly easy for them to remove when the time comes that they need to do maintenance on that particular line. So council could, well, there's a number of alternatives there. If council does direct administration to proceed with putting in that sidewalk, it would be contingent on receiving approval from the actual right-of-way holder. So council and administration can't override that and direct.
And just to confirm that right-of-way holder, Mr. Egan is who again? Is it Fortis?
I want to say Fortis, but to be honest with you, I'm drawing a blank now.
Oh, okay, that's okay. That has to be secured first. Bottom line is what you're saying. All right, fair enough. Okay. Any other questions? Right, so I guess saying that, can we even make a motion on that without clarifying that?
The motion could be made that it is contingent on the approval of the utility right-of-way holder. It actually doesn't mention that in the
With that
recommendation
caveat?
currently. But yeah, we could put that caveat on it if council so desired, or we could go check that out first if council wants us to even check it out and come back again at a future meeting. And so alternative one would be that option again if council
I don't
desires.
know. I'm thinking maybe the second option might be viable and or appropriate at this stage, unless other comments suggested in the other direction. Whatever council's comfort zone is. Well, it's an option, but I'm just saying, like, we haven't got this secure, as Mr. Egan said. If it is Fortis or whoever that might be, until we get that secure, we can't really authorize that before we know that, right? So that's just an option, one option, or we could put that as a caveat within the motion. But I'm thinking of that first option maybe more feasible. Councilor Brew?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that council could require additional information from administration before we go
All right, very well. Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, item 7.4 or 7.5, response to stand item 346, 2023. Mr. Tebow.
Mr. Egan, you don't need to go anywhere. Just stay.
I thought the CAO might handle this one, but this RFD arises out of the October 23rd council meeting, where Councillor Firth directed administration to review the building permit requirements and bring back to council recommendations to streamline the building process and to possibly create a checklist for guidelines for what is required if you'd like to develop in the town of Tabor. The town is the actual responsible party for issuing building permits under the MGA. Building permits themselves are linked to the National Building Code and the Alberta Handicapped Accessibility Codes. And so we have very little, which you may read as none, flexibility in how that process works, how the reviews are undertaken, inspections, because they're public safety related. However, we did, the second part of, we thought of the question was the development permit process, which is totally within the town's purview. That's falls, the fees fall under the fee bylaw. The land use bylaw talks about zoning and districting and the requirements. And so this is how, and the development process is a fairly standard administrative process. These processes and fees are really related to risk management as far as the development of the community. And so there are communities that have no requirements, no land use bylaws, no permits required for development. They still require building permits, but in those communities you could have a pig farm right beside a house. Our zoning and those requirements do lay out some conditions. And so it's really a combination of risk management and best practices. In the RFD, we've identified a local consultant in Calgary, Dillon Consulting, who's done about 10 of these reviews, where they benchmark our processes, our fees, all the components that a developer would encounter with the town of Tabor against best practices that they've garnered from other communities, then make recommendations. That would be phase one, and which is encapsulated in this particular RFD. To implement any changes that were accepted by council would require some further work to amend bylaws and change requirements and have those discussions likely with the community. And so we thought we would include that option as well, just in case that development process review had any interest from council. We're recommending that a third party do it for two reasons. One, we don't have the bandwidth at the moment to undertake with the amount of development that's going on. You'll see in our department report that you'll get next month that there were 30 new utility addresses created 31 new utility addresses created last year, which means 31 new doors in the community, which I'm told is a record. We have a lot underway at the moment, and so our single development officer is quite busy. The other part of that is it's always good to have a third party review almost like an audit from external, someone take a fresh look at things and bring in that information from outside communities and other jurisdictions and what they do and what they've encountered to be considered in that process.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to administration. Thank you for reading between the lines of my motion and inferring the intent, because this was indeed my intent. I said building permit. What I actually meant. This is what I meant. So thank you for interpreting that correctly. And I would be in favor of this. I wish it was a little less than $60,000, but I understand that when you are dealing with consultants, that often the price is the price. But I still believe it would be a benefit to the town of Tabor to streamline our development process, as well as provide the opportunity for feedback from developers and just overall improvement of the process, and to keep us competitive with some of the communities in our area. It's very important. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you for that input, Mr. Egan, as well. Councilor Reckering?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and Mr. Egan, and thank you, Council Firth. That was a really, really good statement you just made. Because initially, I looked at this and I said, "You got to be kidding me! $60,000, no way." But now that what you explained, and the burden of work that's right on the development department at the present time, and Council Firth's very astute statement regarding let's do this correctly, and I'm in favor of it. So I changed my mind.
All right, very well. With that, someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Bruin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've had some discussion about teaming up with Coldell on building inspections and permits and whatnot. This seems like an awful lot of money to spend, which I don't really think we're going to see a lot of benefit from. I don't know. I think the big concern with our permits in the town is how long it takes to get inspectors to come and everything pass that way. What are we going to gain from this study?
So from this study, the proposed study would look at just the development process and the fees and requirements associated with the development permits that typically come before the MPC group, and to make sure that that process matches our risk tolerance and is as streamlined and as effective as it can be in comparison with others and ourselves and our own needs and desires. So one outcome could be that we are best practices. And another outcome could be that we're really deficient in certain areas and we need to make changes. I don't want to appear too self-serving, but our development permit processes are usually fairly fast. There's no development permit that takes months or 6 months or a year. That just doesn't happen in Tabor.
That's why I'm wondering why we have to do this study. It's working pretty good. The big thing is being able to get the inspector when you need them here. And we've streamlined it quite a bit in the last couple of years, I believe.
So the building inspector is part of the building permit process, not the development permit process.
Okay.
Like I mentioned before, the MGA assigns the town of Tabor within our limits. We are the issuers of building permits. We don't have that capacity built into the town administration, so we subcontract that to Superior, who does a lot of smaller towns and MDs because they're professionals, they're well-trained, and they provide that inspection service that you're asking about. Typically, our inspector shows up every Friday, is available for Tabor, and if required to do urgent inspections, we can arrange those as well. Typically, there isn't that level of urgency in building projects where, because they're not usually measured in terms of weeks.
Yeah.
You're talking many months, sometimes a year, 16, 17 months to build something. So.
And I'm just saying, I have a problem with doing this study. I don't think we need to. I wouldn't vote in favor of it.
All right, thank you, Councilor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your comments, Councillor Bruin. While I am generally in favor of collaborating with other communities and sharing costs, I don't think that this is one of those opportunities. Just being that Coaldale would have different, they may have different risk tolerance. They have their own development process, and I mean, we are in competition with them as far as development. So I don't know that it wouldn't make sense to collaborate on this. And I'm prepared to make a motion.
Very well.
So I move that council provides approval for the project to proceed in the 2024 building season with funding not to exceed $60,000 to come from the 2024 capital reserves.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Mr. Tebow?
Just one piece of additional information to reiterate that Mr. Egan had put forward. The initiative that Councillor Bruin was talking about was an inspector initiative with the town of Coaldale, not a development initiative.
All right, thank you. Moving on. Item 7.6, response to standing item 364, 2023. Mr. Tebow?
We'll get Mr. Martin to come up. I'm sure he's been anxiously awaiting his turn this evening to discuss the dog park.
Yes. Give you someone different to look at. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
This is in response to standing item 364, the dog park maintenance, which was brought forth on the November 14th council meeting by Councillor Sorensen for administration to investigate the cost of requirements of maintaining the dog park. Administration has explored, and they've created a project statement which is attached to the RFD, and it's based on the projects and to complete them, the planning, the implementation, and the maintenance of the upgrades that were suggested by the community group that submitted a survey. They did a survey at the dog park, which is also attached to the RFD. Initially, Recreation has used its operating budget to knock off some of the items that were on the survey. These items are things like we installed lighting, garbage receptacles. We put gravel in the enclosures and around them, so people weren't standing in mud. And then we included a picnic table or two just so people had some place to sit while their dogs played. Irrigation has just been brought in from irrigation water supply has been popped into the grounds. It's not installed, it's just we have available water there. So if we ever do have money or funds to install irrigation, we have the supply there. So attached is in the project statement is the 5 items that were remaining off of the survey, these being grading and leveling the grounds, hydroseeding, installing irrigation, improving the pathway, and fencing improvements. They were some of those requests. So attached in there is the costs of all those items. So council could choose to do a sort of an a la carte choice of those items, or remain the way it's been operating now. A survey was done of 13 municipalities, which we also attached, and it's on the screen, yeah. And Tabor is right in line with the 13 that were surveyed, with the exclusion of Coaldale, which made their dog park on a abandoned sports field, so it had grass and groomed surfaces with irrigation. So we're right about where everyone else is at this point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions? Councillor Renford?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Martin, like with the Trail 77 next door, right, to the dog park, they take care of all their own stuff. Like they've made their own society, and the town does nothing, is not going to do any maintenance for them or anything like that.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so I guess the council is, you know, if that's working, maybe the dog park needs somebody like that, because if we just throw some money at it, and, you know, we're the guys forever then, where we're not for Trail 77, maybe the dog park needs somebody like that. You know, I don't know how you promote that administration-wise, you know, you just hope somebody comes, but, you know, if we're not, what's next? You know, a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
Trail 77 is gonna do a great job. It's gonna make that look worse, which might fall towards us, but it's because Trail 77 is doing a good job.
All right, thank you. Mr. Tebow?
Just in response to a dog park society kind of approach that Councilor Memford mentioned. I looked back in a lot of files. I believe the earliest one I could find, the person's name was Aline. I don't remember her last name, but Aline used to be over in recreation at some point in time, years before I got here. And there was emails and things going back and forth to see if there was any appetite to create a dog park society to do just that. Up to this point, there's been no interest in anyone coming forward or any group of people coming forward to participate in that fashion. So we certainly, administration can try again. I don't know what Mr. Martin has done, if he's actually tried to do that again or not, but it has been discussed in the past.
Yes, I can confirm that, as I believe some other council members can as well. There's been one or more individuals attend here on occasion to speak to just that. And the encouragement has been just that, to take that on with the town's input. Has also been suggested with the ball diamonds, as an example, correct? So I think that's working, correct, is it not? Or still in the works?
that's
Okay,
another
sorry.
subject,
I guess I'm
but
not
not so
updated
much.
on that, but that's in the works, let's say that. How's that?
Yeah.
So that's not off the table for that to work in that capacity at some point, but that's just an example of comparison. So those suggestions have already been out there, and I believe, Mr. Martin, you've also had some discussion with some of these reps in the past, have you not?
Yes, so what I've done is I've gone out to the dog park. We made a meeting where I just went to the dog park and physically was there to meet the people who made the survey. We reviewed some of the things that they had in mind, and that was where the additions that we gave to them came from that meeting. So they pointed out where they would like lights, for example. So it took some time because we had to get budget and stuff. So we installed lights where they requested, and when they showed, this area needs gravel, so we repurposed gravel from one of the playgrounds, and we moved it there. So we were doing things sort of as inexpensively as we could, just to give some upgrades to the park.
Right.
And so that's what came from my personal meeting with them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. And just to confirm, just going by the amount of surveys, your comparison you did there, we fall in the middle, you said, basically as far as the level of service we're at?
We're
Or is
we're about the same as all the other ones. There's
Yeah.
a few that are doing a little more. Claire's Home actually has I think they have one or two parks, but they're a community-based group that looks after them.
Right.
The town runs a mower through when it needs it.
And fact of the matter is, check all the municipalities in the province if you like, but there's a high number of municipalities that don't have any dog park, correct?
Yeah.
So, it's hard to, hard to please everybody no matter what you do or don't do. And it's, I guaranteed or granted that there is a lot of users there. I'm gonna guess, 500 users or so probably. Is that an accurate number?
Well,
That's
on
just a
there,
guesstimate of my
they
end,
had
but-
431 dogs visited during the date of the survey, but that was over just over a month or around a month. Worth of
Just the
survey.
fact that we're looking to promote recreation out there, have been for many years. It's I understand where they're coming from, and you know what? We get compared to Colda because just on the road, and they've got this pristine dog park, which is great, but is that completely practical? I don't know. I guess, and what kind of cost is attached to that? And I guess that's the difference. And like when you compare Trail 77 fundraising on their own, and yes, we donated the land there for sure, but we donated the land for the dog park too. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I guess it just takes somebody to take that next step and pick up the ball and come see us, right? And come see yourself, and before they get to council even. And, geez, it's not like we're not working against them. We're trying to work with recreation users, right? And come up with a solution, not, don't want to be part of the problem. We want to come up with a solution, basically. So, but what's practical? And it's, your input is right on cue. So, Councillor Beckering,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to make a motion.
very well.
Council received the report for information.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.7, standard items, council requests. Mr. Tebow. Your second favorite one.
Yes, my second favorite one. So I thought we'd knock a few more off tonight than we did, but we didn't. So we'll remain in progress on a couple of them, which is fine.
All right.
So the traffic committee ones did get deferred. We got held up a little bit internally with some of the folks that were tasked with looking after that for various reasons. So we will come back to the 22nd. We actually deferred one of them. We didn't think that we would have all of our members of council tonight that had a vested interest in that, specifically the councillor who made the motion. So we wanted to wait until Councillor Broom was back to have that discussion. So it's actually ready. The traffic committee will be at the next one, and the very bottom one we are labeled as completed. So on January the 22nd meeting, as mentioned, administration will have our sort of planning discussion with all the previous topics that were discussed and notations and things like that from our, I guess, almost 2 years ago now with Gordon McIntosh, coming up with our list and making sure we're still heading the right direction, and just some general discussion as discussed. So I think all councillors are so far supposed to be here on the 22nd, and again, all councillors was desired to be here to have that discussion. So I'll hand it back over to council to do what you will with the list.
All right. Any new standing item council requests? Councillor Rumford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, last time I started talking bull rushes and I planned to be more prepared. Did something kind of come up? So I guess going back to Councilor Firth talking about development, I guess Mr. Egan, maybe more in your way, you kind of talked that maybe building, waiting on Superior and stuff like that might be a developer's more issues we're hearing rather than just getting a permit and stuff like that. Do we have is there a huge amount of developers in Tabor, or would it be able to get something out to them developers to find out if that is if it's something like Superior that we have no control of is the issue, or should we be, maybe instead of bringing a third party in without knowing if it is that side, or if they do have concerns and we can see that, maybe would have moved my decision a little bit, not having to guess myself if it was, Superior issue or deficiencies in Tabor. Is there something along that line of a survey we could put out? The only thing is if we have hundreds of developers and we only get 10% response, then it's pointless, right? So I just kind of don't know if what I'm asking you is pointless or not.
All right, thank you, Councillor Rumford. That's a loaded question. Who wants to field that one?
I'll start. I'll try.
Mr.
But yeah, Mr. Egan can certainly come to the microphone and bail me out as required.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's 3 developers, it's
So
easier.
I'll lead with, it's not always a local developer that we're dealing with. So we couldn't really speculate on the amount of developers, I wouldn't think, although we could probably say that we deal with typically, 15 or less developers. I don't know how many we've dealt with in the past. Could we do a survey out to developers to see what their concerns are?
Yeah.
It's possible that we could do up something like that, if that's what you think might
Yeah,
be after.
because, in that, you were talking like 31 being a record, that was in development. You're talking about in the development report coming in January, talk of more development, which sounds like development's going very well on our end, right? However, if there is some deficiencies we would have found out, we did pass on having an audit, right? So I was just wondering if there was a way to kind of get in between it.
So maybe I could provide some information.
Yeah, yes.
There are 3 types of developers, loosely 3 buckets that we encounter. The first being the professional full-time developers.
Yeah.
And so they're doing this in multiple locations, sometimes across the country. And there are some local developers, a few of them that fall into that category, but it would be, you could count them on one hand. There are developers that are doing multiple renovations or residences, because any kind of a change, either in use or in the facility itself, is considered a development, which is a very broad category. And so you'll find that there's a group of local, I'll say small L local, people that do multiple developments, but limited to a couple a year. And then the vast majority of people are, the numbers are, they're doing a development to their own property. And so it's their first-time users. The types of interactions we normally see would be more frequently we would get questions about the process from the third group, that it's their first time doing it. It's not a common process, and not very many people interact on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis until you're wanting to put a shed or build a garage or expand your house or build a deck or something like that. And if you don't employ a professional consultant and or a professional builder that's local and knows us and that we interact with quite a bit, then that individual is trying to figure their way through the process. And it is a process. I'm not too sure how many people voluntarily read and memorize parts of the land use bylaw. I know prior to being in public service, I didn't do it, and I was a professional engineer. And so it is a detailed and specific document, and there's a whole field of study that goes into becoming a professional planner. So
Asking the one-time user how it goes would probably not help because it's a tough process regardless. Do you see the handful of guys, do you think it would be beneficial to them, I guess, to scrutinize you, like to scrutinize this end? Or do you feel, we're going to just get it's all great and we just...
well, it's unlikely that the business people who are professionals will say that it's all great. They would likely have suggestions on how to improve the process, and I'll put air quotations around that. Again, I would encourage you to think of it as a risk management approach to things that our processes and the specifications that we put in our bylaws require individuals to provide more or less information, to provide it through just the development officer, or things have to come to council. Those are all ways of making decisions. So it's a fairly broad and deep issue that everyone is fairly unique, although I like to say that it's generally, all development processes are generally the same, and every development is specifically different.
I guess just a question would be, do you feel with, the amount of development going in the recent little bit, that you're confident that it is pretty good? The deficiencies there's nothing, if you were seeing a lack of development, you could see more of a push for an audit from the outside, but it doesn't seem like you're seeing that.
I think certainly we field questions in the planning department, but and the odd complaint. But it's likely that council would be the first line of complaints, both from all three buckets of development people. And so, because we actually there are times when we say, as a planning group, we have a land use bylaw that says X, we have to conform to that. If you would like it changed or to discuss it, we would encourage you to go talk to the people's representatives, which is council, and see if you can get some traction on that. So if you're not receiving an abundance of complaints or a consistent complaint about a specific part of our process, then you could I would suggest you would use your own judgment to decide whether we're at that tipping point where we're broken enough where we need a comprehensive process. The other thing I'd add is that we're currently out in a search for a new manager of planning and development. That person is, we're targeting an intermediate level person, so they will come with some experience from elsewhere, and they will, within a few weeks or months, be able to provide some feedback whether they think we're generally okay, or there's some specific things we need to tweak, or they might be in a better position to provide that third-party answer given their other experience, which would be, it's not the same as using a consultant. That would be very comprehensive and very detailed and provide some very specific recommendations, but it may help with the feel of whether you want to engage at a certain amount of dollars, a bigger project.
All right, thank you, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through to Councillor Remford. That was the intent of my initial motion, was to get to the bottom of this, and it was based on feedback from developers. And I find Mr. Egan's answer somewhat reassuring, the fact that we didn't go forward, because it hasn't been consistent complaints, but it was just a comment that perhaps there was things that could be done to streamline the process. I mean, there's always room for improvement. Nobody's perfect, but I mean, if the development is happening and we're not receiving repeated specific feedback, then maybe if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. All right. Get the covered. Perfect. Thank you. Any other standing item council requests? Right. Seeing none. We have no delegations today. Meeting inquiries, Mr. Tebow.
Same answer as usual. No media inquiries.
As expected. Thank you. All right. No closed session today. With that, I would ask for most to close the meeting. Councillor Firth.
I move that we close the meeting.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.